Yo, what is up, Bitcoiners, plebs, heat punks, DIYers? Welcome back to the Stack and Sat Show. I'm your host, Trevor Bello, and today I have something I think you're going to enjoy. So I'm going to be diving into the APW 12 modification for the S19 series miners, and basically the overview, the 10,000 foot overview or understanding of what I'm going to be doing is how to take a stock power supply from an S19 and modify it so that you can run it off of 120 volts. Now, this is a super, in my opinion, this is a super easy modification. However, it will take a little bit of technical chops. If you're not a DIYer, if you're not afraid of breaking something, probably shouldn't do this. But if you're watching the show, you're probably a DIYer. You're probably somebody who's not afraid to break stuff, get your hands dirty, and that's why you follow me. So, welcome back to the Stack and Sat Show. We're going to be diving into this. Now, a couple of things before I actually dive into the episode and go over it. I just want to say I apologize to my audience who have been waiting for an episode. It's been a couple of months since I released one. That is on me. That's my bad. I have been slammed with work and building my construction company and a bunch of other things that I just really haven't had time to sit down and build stuff and do what I wanted to do with this show. So please be patient with me. I do apologize. There will be builds coming in the future. I don't know how often they're going to be coming. I'm trying to make sure I stick to a regular cadence on Build a Mine, and I'm just super busy with my construction company. I'm just like trying to manage everything and juggle all of it all at once, all while being an active father. So needless to say, it's hard to sit down and actually build stuff and then film it and put it together and then put it out in a way that like you guys enjoy it and understand it. So I do apologize. I appreciate your patience, but this is going to be just a one video, one take go. I'm not sure how long it's going to be. I'm going to try to keep it really short. There is a little bit of a technical process that needs to be done. Now, in regards to the APW 12, I do think it's a pretty easy modification. It will require, as I said before, a little bit of technical know-how. I recommend any of you who do it, buy the solder station. Don't just do the soldering iron. It'll make it a little bit better just because you can adjust the temperature of the solder gun itself instead of just being on off. That does help. Plus the heat gun that I have is really nice as well, because there's a couple of things that you have to do on the bottom of the control board or whatever it is that, a heat gun is helpful with. So yeah. I'm trying to think of like all the other things that need to be said before we dive into this. I am not an electrician. I'm not an engineer. I'm not a voltage technician. So everything I do, take it with a grain of salt. This is what I've done, what I've learned from people in the past, people like Rev Hodl on Noster and others like Zach Bomsta and Pivotal Pleb. All of this information can be found out there. You can get an even more in-depth overview of how to do this. This is just a video format, so I'm hoping that you guys can see this and see that it's not really that hard. It is a little technical. You will need a couple of things. You're going to need some, I think they're 1 ohm resistors. I'll get back to you on that just in case, and it might not be the right one, but you will want some resistors, and you're going to want a soldering iron. You're going to want some good solder. Don't get the lead solder, get the really high quality solder. That's important. And, it is helpful to have some like pincer stands, things that hold it together. I kind of did everything with some pliers and just propping things up, which isn't the best. It's not wrong necessarily, but it's not right either. But, nonetheless, we're DIYers over here. We get stuff done. And then just so that you understand, this is only for the S19 series miners. These are for the miners with the APW 12 power supplies. I think some of the S21s have these power supplies, and I think some of the S17s have them. I'm not exactly sure on that, so don't quote me, but it's only for the APW 12 power supplies, and this allows you to go from 220 to 120, and you can actually swap back and forth. because what we're doing is we're bypassing the brownout detectors. And those just kind of tell the computer inside the power supply, hey, we don't have enough voltage or whatever. And so it stops running. So these kind of just bypass that and you go down to a lower voltage from what I understand. So it is really nice, especially if you want to test between 120 and 220, makes it easier to do that. When you're running the miner, so I've been running my LOKI rig over there for a couple of months now. It's turned off now because it's hot, but I was running it for a little while. I could only run 2 boards. And sometimes when those boards started to ramp up because of the firmware, it would actually flip the breaker. So keep in mind that if you run it like I do, you can't necessarily run all 3 boards unless your firmware allows you to severely underclock. Now, I did try Lux, I did try Brains, I also tried Epic firmware, and none of those firmwares, and it could just be me, I might just be retarded, but none of those firmwares allowed me to underclock enough to run all 3 boards. So keep that in mind. Also, I do think it's the way that I wired it up. So what I did is I bought a plug off of Amazon, and so it's a C13 dual plug and then a 120 outlet plug. I wired those together, so it's kind of a bridged harness. You could probably run 2 harnesses, 2 C13 to 120 volt plugs, and that might allow you to run all 3 boards off of the same circuit. I'm not exactly sure. Do your own testing, figure it out yourself. I'm just going to show you what I did and let you know the results that I've had. So far, the S19 has been running for, a couple of months really well. It heats up the studio really nicely. I think I'm getting 30 terahash at like 32 joules per terahash, which isn't the best, but I also don't pay for electricity here, so it's a good opportunity for me. Anyways, let's just dive right in. No more beating around the bush. Let's go over here to the workbench and show you what I'm talking about. So as you guys know, I have built a LOKI rig. This is the LOKI board that helps me make that configuration possible. That configuration allows me to trick my 220 volt S19K Pro or S19J, S19 series miner into running off of 110 volts. Now, what I've done here is the same thing that most people do with their LOKI boards. You hook up the LOKI rig to the CP to the control board, and you just plug everything in and you go. I've got a video on it that we've done in the past. Now, this is a little bit different of a LOKI rig. It's still considered a LOKI rig because it's tricking the computer or the power supply into running off 110 volts, but it does it in a little bit different way. Now, the APW 12 is the stock power supply that comes with your S19 miner. There's a lot of different variants, a lot of different numbers. This is the APW 12, 14, 17. What you got to do basically is pull this apart, and I'll fast track through here in a second after I'm done talking. I know, yada, yada, yada. Anyways, we're going to be pulling this thing apart, and there's 2 brownout detectors, which I'll share the FAQ, the modification guide from Pivotal Pleb, so that you can kind of see exactly what you're doing. But you're going to take those brownout detectors, you're going to scrape off the coating. You got to be real gentle when you do that. And then you're going to solder on 2 1-ohm resistors onto the brownout detectors. You can get those resistors from Amazon. I'll have links to everything that I've purchased. I've also made my build a little bit easier. This is something that this is something that Rev Hodl shared with me. So I'll just show it right now. I got this off of Amazon. This is a C13 plug. It's got the dual plug, so it goes down to 1. And I cut the end off and I wired on a standard 120 volt plug. I think that's what it's called. So yeah, interesting, but it should make it to where I don't have to plug it in twice. I just have to plug it in once. Anyways, let's pop this bad boy off of here if I can. Come Come on. Okay. There she goes. There she blows. All right. Hey, it's actually pretty clean in here. This one hasn't been used very much. Anyways, so you see what it looks like in here. Cool stuff. Good stuff. All right, so I'm going to just pull all this apart, and then I'll show you what we're doing. All right, so we are back. Hopefully that wasn't too long for you guys. When you're taking the screws out of this board, there's going to be screws all around the edges. There's going to be 2 screws in this white section here. Maybe I don't know if you can see that. Try to make it clearer. Again, sorry, my camera's kind of poor quality. In this white area here, you can see. Let's see if I can point to it. So there's a screw. Oh my gosh, what am I doing? There's a screw there, and there's also a screw here. Oh my gosh. The orientation of my fingers and hands. So there's a screw there as well inside the white that you'll have to pull off as well to get this board out. Be very gentle. Do not lose any screws. It's very important that you have all of them. And then what you're going to do is you're going to flip it over on the back. You're going to look on the back of it. I don't know if I'm going to be able to highlight this very well. I'll just draw some circles on it so that you can see what I'm talking about. All right, so these are the brownout detectors. See where I've marked it in black here and here. I know it's very difficult to see. Again, I'm going to share the modification guide that Zach created on Pivotal Pleb. But what we're going to be doing is we're going to be scraping off the coating and soldering some resistors onto those brownout detectors. It's a very tedious process. I'll do it on camera, but it is going to be done quickly. Just keep in mind that you want to try to scrape off as much of the coating as possible, because when you heat it up, that coating puts off a toxic fume, and it's not good for you to breathe in. But you want to get that coating off so that you can also get down to the chip itself, so you can solder onto the metal. And you have to be really careful when you're taking it off, because if you take too much off, you'll ruin it and it won't work. So the idea is to scrape enough off to where you can still breathe and you're not using the fumes, and you can get down to the metal there, but not scrape off so much that you scrape the metal off itself. All right, let's dive right in. We'll be back when it's finished. All right, so I don't know if you guys saw what I did there or not, because the camera is so far away, but I actually took a heat gun and I heated up the coating, and I used my knife to just kind of scrape it just a little bit. It seemed to make that process go a lot faster without actually scraping the metal of the chip that's on there. So next we're going to solder on our little resistors, wherever they went. So I've got some tiny little resistors here. It's hard for you guys to see them, but they're there. Little resistors. Boom. We're going to solder these on, get them to size, and then I'll show you what it looks like afterwards. This is a little bit of a tedious process, so bear with me. Okay, that took a little bit of time. Couple of things I noticed, and this is something that was brought up to me before I even started the project. It would be very helpful if you had some super glue, or not super glue, some hot glue, so that you could glue these resistors in place before you actually solder them. Because as you kind of noticed in the time lapse, I had to support my pliers and kind of like get a little daub of solder on there before I could even start. It was kind of a little bit of a pain in the ass. Also, I noticed that when you take your resistors, you got these resistors, they got these long tail ends. The length that you cut them matters. And I cut one way too short, so it made it a little bit more difficult. Also, you want them kind of sitting flat. You don't want them standing up. So they're soldered on there. Now the moment of truth is just getting this put all back together and plugging it in and seeing if the fans turn on. If the fans turn on, we did it right. If they didn't, then we did it wrong and we wasted all that time for nothing. So let's get it put back together and see what happens. All right, guys. Got her put back together. I guess now's the moment of truth. We'll do it on camera, see if Trevor screwed it up or if Trevor did it right. So we'll know if the fans themselves kick on. And I'll put the speaker next to it just so you know. You guys will hear it if it does. And if it doesn't, it's back to the drawing board to see what I did wrong. If I did something wrong, it's most likely the soldering. So, hey, look at that. Fans kicked on. All right. So that is how you do that. A couple of things I want you guys to keep in mind when you're doing this is that the black piece of plastic needs to go back exactly where it was. Otherwise, you're going to have a hard time getting the screws in. Make sure that the two grounds for the plug, so you see the port here, you can see the port here. The two wire grounds that go on the metal. They don't go on the circuit board. They go on the metal. So make sure those go back there. I did something wrong with this one sitting over here to the edge of the corner. So this one over here, I messed up something. And I think it has to do with the fact that I didn't properly put those back. So I'm actually going to try that off camera and see if that works. Otherwise, the soldering might have been the issue. But I noticed that, when you heat up that coating with a heat gun and scrape it off nice and gently, it comes off really easily. So yeah, we're going to basically set this up on the LOKI rig that we have running in the background right now. We're going to run that as the power supply and see what we can get out of the single hash board. If I have really good numbers, we might end up putting all three hash boards in it and see what happens. But to be honest, I really only want to keep one hash board in it for the studio power, or for the studio LOKI rig, just because the studio gets way too warm as it is. But yeah, really cool, a lot of fun, super easy. To be honest, it's really not that hard to do this. It does matter. You want to make sure you have a good solder station. You can see my solder station here. I picked this up for about $250 on Amazon a long time ago. I've had it for a while, but it comes with the heat gun and your solder gun. So super cool stuff. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. And if you guys learned something, let me know. If not, tell me how I'm screwing it up. But basically, that is the build. I hope it wasn't too long. Yeah, I really appreciate you guys sticking with it. And we will see you guys on the next episode of Stacking Sats.